Hello everyone. Hi. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us on this Saturday afternoon for the Synthfest 2020 presentation. My name's Chris Calcutt, also known as CALC, and this is our little presentation for the Synthfest event. This presentation is basically, we're just going to have a bit of fun really, I guess. I've got the Novation Summit synthesizer here in front of me, and we're going to, we're basically going to take a bit of time just exploring the synthesizer a little bit, some of the things that we can do with it, but also we're going to just do a bit of sound design and really have a bit of fun with it as well. So essentially, I mean, this is a kind of an open house day, if you like, as part of the Synthfest 2020 event. Of course, sadly, we can't all be there in person this time around. So with Sound on Sound putting together this online event, we wanted to be involved as well. And so the idea is really just to kind of have an open house, a bit of a chat, a bit of a talk about the Summit synthesizer, the various things that you can do with it, make some sounds as well, have a bit of a play with it. Really just kind of have it as a little forum. If you've got questions for the Summit as well, I have my chat room open over here, so we can take a look at any questions. Let's get started, I guess. So, for those of you that don't know, I'll do a little introduction to the instrument first of all. The Summit is, well, basically it's our latest synthesizer from Novation. It's a very powerful system. It's essentially a big poly synthesizer. It's taking the architecture that we developed for the Novation Peak synth and actually sticking kind of like two of them inside a keyboard. I mean, if you're familiar with the Peak synthesizer, this is a desktop system. It's an 8-voiced polyphonic, and it's a hybrid synthesizer as well. And there's some quite interesting things about the, that aspect of the instrument, the fact that it's both digital and analog. So it's taking kind of some of the really powerful bits from both of those and cramming them together into a polysynth. Now the Summit, as I just mentioned, is essentially kind of two of the Peak synthesizers, but crammed inside obviously a full 61 key sized key bed. So we've got a full player's instrument here. Now let's just think about the kind of the architecture of it. Obviously you can see we've got our keyboard, of course, at the bottom, but we've got a whole huge amount of panel control on the top here as well. We've got 3 independent oscillators. We've got 16 voices, and we can do some clever things with the voices in terms of kind of stacking them to get really big unison kind of sounds. But also we can split the instrument into 2 separate synthesizers and start to stack different sounds on top of each other. So a very powerful kind of system to work with. Let's talk a little bit about kind of the way that the synthesizer is kind of configured. Now, I mentioned just before we've got kind of a hybrid system that is using both digital and it's using analog. Now, it's kind of digital in the control section. All the top panel controls are digital, so that gives us the ability to store and recall patches. Of course, by using digital controls like this, we can basically store our patches, and we've got thousands of patches available inside the Summit as well. But in addition to that, we've got kind of digital oscillators, but these are very, very special digital oscillators. They're not your kind of typical kind of digital synthesizer oscillators. These are have been designed by engineer Chris Huggett, who is pretty much the brains behind a lot of the synthesizers that we make. I mean, he's an absolute legend in terms of British synthesizer design. He's the guy behind the original Wasp in the 1970s, and then the Oscar synthesizer in the 80s, then the Base Station, and all the way through the Novation synthesizers that have been produced since. Now, Chris kind of found a way to use a very special type of processor called an FPGA, and instead of using a traditional kind of format where you would have like a digital processor, a DSP, digital signal processor, then running through into essentially an analog to digital converter, or digital to analog converter, I should say, because we're taking the digital side and converting it to analog. those kind of converters generally will use standard sample rates, 44.1, 48 kilohertz, that sort of thing. But by using this type of processor, Chris was able to get the waveforms out of there without having to use a digital to analog converter. He was able to use the processor speed itself, which is 24 megahertz. Now that's 24 million times a second that we're able to create these digital waveforms. So what are the advantages to that? Well, of course, with analog waveforms, you've got this beautiful kind of constantly evolving sound produced by the electricity. But with digital, we can do a whole lot more. For example, you know, with analog, you've generally got your 4 wave shapes. You've got your sine, triangle, sawtooth, and square. But with digital, of course, you can do all sorts of things, such as the wavetable side. And we're going to look at and explore a little bit about wavetables using the Summit shortly as well. So it really kind of opens up a lot more kind of sonic possibilities by having the ability to use digital waveforms. But at such high resolution, 24 million times a second, we're getting little snapshots of the sound, if you like. That's a way to think of it. You know, it's pretty much indiscernible from that of an analog synthesizer. Now, obviously, the digital side, the oscillators here, but we've got a true analog filter. In fact, we've got 16 of those inside here. It's a 16 voice instrument, so we have a filter per each voice. So we've got true analog filtering going on here, and also analog distortions. So the overdrive, there's a pre-filter overdrive, which is this one here. There's a post-filter overdrive, which is in the menu here, filter post drive. And then finally, we've got an analog distortion at the end. This is after the VCA, so this is kind of an overall kind of heavy distortion side. So we've got a lot of great analog goodness inside of here as well. And then at the end, we've got some, well, it's essentially really, really great sounding digital effects as well, such as a huge reverb, a really lovely sounding reverb. So that's kind of a brief overview of kind of the architecture of it, if you like. We've got digital control panel. We've got these very high resolution digital oscillators, but running at super fast speed. So we basically, they're as efficient and just sound fantastic in terms of, you know, comparing these to analog oscillators. There's really there's no difference really between the sound that's produced from them. And then the analog filter and distortions, and then of course the digital effect at the end. So I'm going to have a quick look at the chat here, because I've just seen, see if we've got some questions about this. So let's see. Okay, right. Can you do a dead mouse electro sound with it? Well, I'm sure you can. I mean, I'm just going to initialize a sound here. So this is just going to be a sawtooth sound. Put a bit of overdrive into that and just bring the filter up. And then let's just add a bit of LFO to it on a sawtooth shape, I think. And then let's see if we just bring up the resonance a little bit. And we can just use the LFO there. Now this is a super basic patch. I mean, obviously deadmau5 would spend a long time crafting his sounds. And also we can maybe just add a bit of a modulation envelope to it as well. So this is just going to change the pitch. So we're getting into this kind of this sound now. Now, I guess with this sort of that sound, you might want a bit of distortion on the end as well. So there we go. There's a bit of a crazy kind of LFO shaped sound. That was just using a single oscillator. I mean, one thing we could do is perhaps go to the voice menu here and turn on the unison as well, so we can actually stack up the oscillators on top of each other. Now with unison, we've got 16 voices in total in the instrument, but if we're using unison, when I press a key, it's going to basically let me double those up. So here, it's just going to use a single sound. If I go to, I don't know, let's go to 2, we're going to actually stack the 2 voices on top of each other. So when I press a single key, we'll use 2 voices, as you see here. And we can go all the way up to 8 voices. So let's get Now, one of the interesting things that we can do here is we can actually detune this as well. So you can hear that can really kind of thicken out the sound now. And let's bring in another oscillator. I'm going to bring in Oscillator 3 down here. Now this is current, Oscillator 1 is set to a sawtooth, so is Oscillator 3. Let's just bring that down an octave. Now, one of the great things with the LFO here, which is going pretty slowly at the minute, but the LFO can go really fast. Kind of getting into real sort of almost FM territories with this. I'm just going to turn down a touch. It's quite loud in my headphones there. So that's kind of, I suppose, a type of electro sound you could make. I mean, the great thing about the Summit, of course, is the fact that it's just so open-ended. I mean, we started from an initialized patch and we very, very quickly got into, you know, kind of, well, into some quite weird sonic territories there. So, you know, you can do some interesting stuff. Now, if I just scroll down a bit, I saw a question, so show some useful use of the FM. Well, that's a good question. So let's just initialize the patch here. Let's just go back to initial patch. I should mention, actually, a special mention to this button here, the initialize button. That's probably one of my favorite things that I've got on the actual instrument here. Basically, the initialize button just resets everything. So no matter where you are, I mean, if I'm just kind of get a sound up here. So just get one of the presets up. So I have some fun with that, and then I think, actually, no, I want to start making another patch now. So I'm just going to press Initialize, and we're just back to a single oscillator, Oscillator 1, just on a sawtooth. Super simple to use. Now, somebody mentioned, as I say, yeah, show some useful use of the FM. Well, that's a great question, I guess, because on the Summit synthesizer, basically we've got the FM controls exposed on the top panel here. So these are the FM controls here. Now, this can be done on the Peak synthesizer, but basically to access FM, you have to basically route that in as a modulation, as in the modulation matrix. So although we can do that directly on the Peak, one thing that's really useful is actually just having these controls here for immediate access. So if I just wanted to very quickly, here's the sawtooth again, just add some FM to that shape. We could just simply dial in the FM. Now, we're using quite a complex kind of wave shape here as a sawtooth, but let's see. So what this is going to do is basically it's going to take Oscillator 3, and we've got 3 individual controls for the oscillators, by the way. So you've got access to all of the oscillators at all times. So basically it's going to take Oscillator 3 and use this as a modulation source for Oscillator 1. It's going to modulate at audio frequencies. So basically at the same frequency, at the same speed as Oscillator 1. And basically now, if I just basically, well, yeah, I'll just tune the coarse pitch a little bit. So there we go. Now this is super basic. This is just two sawtooths modulating each other. If I want to go a bit more with this, the tuning. So now we've got a bit of FM going on with 2 sawtooths. Now traditionally, let's just initialize. Traditionally, FM would be with sine waves. And so I've just switched Oscillator 1 to a sine wave, Oscillator 3 to a sine wave, and let's just try the same thing. So here's your sine wave. In fact, I'm just going to latch that key on, hold that on, and then again using this control here, you can hear that's opening up the frequency modulation control. And once again, if I start to play around with the pitch of Oscillator 3, now what's interesting is you kind of change the pitch up, you'll hear these side bands come in, which could be really nice as well. Now, usually when things are kind of in tune, so here I've set this to +7 semitones, which is basically a perfect fifth, then now you're going to have kind of a musical sound. And again, if I've got my sustain pedal down here, I'm just going to use this while I'm playing, but back to a sine. So the FM controls here on the top panel are really, really useful. Now, you'll see next to the FM control, I've got manual, mod envelope 2 and LFO 2. And this switch is actually, well, basically this pot here has 3 functions and they work all at the same time. So not just one or the other, they all work together. So the manual control is just basically, just dial it in. You're manually dialing it in. But if I wanted to maybe start from this position, so I've dialed in the manual, and then I want to add some mod envelope 2. Now over this section we've got our envelopes, and we have a dedicated envelope for the amplifier, so we can use this to shape. So we'll add a bit of attack, a bit of decay, just bring the sustain down a bit and add a bit of release. So okay, let's just bring the sustain down a touch more. So we've got a shape for the amplifier there, but let's now add some additional shaping to the FM. So what I can do is I can take mod envelope 2, and we've only got a single control down here for the mod envelopes, but super simple to switch between them. So let's go to mod envelope 2 here. So just press that button, and then I'm going to add a bit of attack as well. In fact, I'm going to bring the amp up, the sustain up a bit, because otherwise we'll not hear the changing here. But let's just add a bit of shape to the FM as well. So let's just do that. So, oh yeah, and now we've made the shape. Now we need to add some to the sound. So let's just add that much to it. Let's add a little bit more, I reckon. Now if I take the manual all the way down, you'll see that we start from a sine and then add FM in following the shape of this envelope. So let's just bring that down again. Right, let's take the attack off and just have some decay now. And you can hear it's pulling back into the sine wave. Of course, we can then add some LFO as well. So LFO2 is directly connected to the FM port here. So let's add some LFO2, and let's just put a bit of rate on there as well. And actually, I'll put a fade in. Well, I'll put some fading in a minute, but so you can hear now I've added the LFO there, but let's add some fade time as well. And what this will do is it will have a period of no LFO, but gradually the LFO will then add to the sound. So there's a little bit of FM stuff that you can do. Now, let's see. Oh yeah, let's just stick a bit of reverb on the end, because I just want to have a quick listen to this reverb. I absolutely love the sound of this reverb. Very simple controls. We've just got a time, which is obviously the kind of the length, if you like, of the reverb tail, and then a level as well. So I'm just going to open up the level there. So it's got a lovely kind of sound to it. So there we go. What else can we do? I think maybe it's time to let's go a bit crazy. He says, let's add some microtuning to it, because I think that's going to work really well. Yeah, with this. So what's microtuning? Well, this was basically the ability to retune the notes on the keyboard. Now, normally you've got an octave, and that's made up of 12 notes, your standard kind of chromatic keyboard. And this is called an equal temperament. And it basically, each of these semitones is equally spaced to the next. Now, a full octave here, C to C. In terms of frequency, hertz, it's going to be double. And that's going to be like halfway between. But in actual fact, on an equal tempered keyboard, that's ever so slightly out. And this is going to be a really subtle trick. But let me tell you what, I'm going to bring in a second oscillator. And I'm going to tune up the oscillator to a major third. In fact, let's just take off the FM. Oh, we've got the mod envelope on and the LFO on, and take the manual down. Now, that's where the major third is perfectly in tune, but if I just knock that down a touch, now that's actually perfectly in tune. We'll go back up to 0. That's really, really subtle, this. You might not hear it. But basically now... Oh. There we go. Now, it's really subtle, that. Anyway, the point was... Oh, and I lost my sound now, didn't I? Great. The beauty of live live stuff here. Anyway, let's just go back to our original sound. Back to a sine. Okay, that'll do. Now, I'm going to go to my oscillator menu. This is really worth experimenting with. Now, at the minute, this is set to tuning table 0. Tuning table 0 is basically no tuning table. So let's go to a different tuning table. Now you can hear it's completely out. So when we start to play, we'll just get a bit of attack to that sound, I think. In fact, let's just play a C minor Arpeggiator. Let's latch that on. Now you can hear that's not really C minor. Let's add some different chords now. So this is a really interesting kind of way of just adding some really strange flavouring to your sound. Let's change the tuning table to a different table now. Now, don't forget, this is just a C minor. Let's go C minor, there we go. So this can really open up a lot of difference to the way that you make music. And I think now, yeah, we've got 16 tuning tables, but I think up to the other end, I'm kind of just in normal kind of tunings there. Now, that was a bit of a kind of a strange kind of departure, I guess. But I do find tuning tables quite a fascinating thing to work with. And yeah, it does mean you can get some really quite unusual kind of musical kind of effects with it. And what I find is as well, if you're certainly, you know, if you're working with a little sequence or an arpeggiator or something like that, your ears very quickly become accustomed to this new kind of tuning, and it just kind of really opens up kind of a new kind of harmony, new kind of texture, and it's a really interesting, fascinating thing to work with. I should just very quickly show you how easy it is to program up a tuning table. So here we're just now back into a normal tuning. If I go to my settings page and go all the way to the end here, I've got access to my tuning tables. Now this is brilliant because basically I can just press a single note here. So here's C3. In fact, just what I want to do is before I do this, I'm going to just quickly turn on, where is it? Yeah, tuning mode is set to octave. That's great. So what that means is that basically when I make a tuning, it's going to remember that across all the octaves. So I only really have to make 12 tunings for each of these notes here. So I can just simply press the note and then go to the fraction retune. Now I've made that C very sharp. And now we can just kind of really dial in, and I'm just randomly doing this. Let's go back. So now, and once again, if I play my C minor arpeggio, got a completely different kind of flavor to it. So it's that simple to create tuning tables on this device. I don't know of another instrument, hardware instrument certainly, that can, you know, that lets you kind of create tuning tables in that way. I think it's a very, very powerful thing. Right, let's see. Okay, so there are some questions in the chat, and there's some that I'm not going to answer about anything that might or might not be upcoming in the near future. From Novation, but let's just see. Vimana, I love my vintage synths, but I love Novation as well. First got the Bass Station 2 and then the Nova, then a Supernova 2, fantastic instrument. I also have an X Station 61, well-designed synths, and the filter's great. Well, I heartily agree with that, Vimana, yeah, definitely. Let's see. Are there any plans for adding MPE to the Peak? That would be super cool. Well, that's a really interesting idea. I would say at the moment, at this point in time, we're not working on anything that's actually going to do that, but who knows in the future, for sure. I mean, I think, you know, MPE is a very interesting approach to working with synthesizers. One thing that the Summit and the Peak synthesizers can do is actually respond to poly aftertouch, and that is kind of, it's not quite MPE, but it's certainly something that is really quite nice and interesting to work with. And let's just create, again, let's start a patch from scratch. So there we go, we've got our typical sawtooth. I'm just going to filter down, bring up the second oscillator, and just retune the second oscillator a touch there. So let's just bring that up a touch. So when you detune the oscillators there, you can just really hear that thicken out the sound a lot. Let's just change the waveform there as well. Yeah. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about poly aftertouch here. Now, what's interesting is, of course, the Summit here doesn't have a polyphonic aftertouch keybed. Polyphonic aftertouch keybeds are very expensive things and are, yeah, I mean, to be honest, if we'd have gone for a poly aftertouch keybed in this synthesizer, it would have really pushed the price of that thing up, and it probably would have not helped the Summit kind of gain the traction that it's got. But what we can do is we can still send polyphonic aftertouch to the instrument, and it will recognize and work with that. So in terms of polyphonic controllers, polyphonic aftertouch controllers, there are a number of them cropping up now. I believe the Hydra synth keyboard is a poly aftertouch keybed. But we have our own polyphonic aftertouch controllers as well, and one of which, of course, is the Launchpad Pro over here. Now, I'm going to, let's see. Now, apologies for the sound here. While I just move over here, the microphone will change, but I'm just going to go to Note, and yeah, that's on. Great stuff. Okay. Turn that on. Yeah, let's get. That'll do. Okay. Okay, so we've just got a bit of a minor scale going on the Launchpad Pro here. Okay, so Poly Aftertouch. Let's just bring the filter down here now. Now, in terms of what's going on here, I've latched this on. When I move this filter control here, that's basically moving the filter for all of the voices at the same time. When I hit a key, it's activating that filter. In fact, let's just add a bit of envelope to that. The key is controlling the filter. But how about if I hold down the key and then I want to just emphasize a single note and just bring that out? So we can do that using Poly Aftertouch. So how to access Poly Aftertouch? Well, this is in the mod matrix. Now, this is an incredibly powerful part of the Summit instrument. Basically, this turns Summit into a modular synthesizer. A bit like the modular I've got sitting by the side of me here. This is actually, yeah, this does the same sort of thing, but obviously it just does it in a menu format. So here I've got my sources, and I have two sources which I can use, and I can combine those two sources together. So let's say we're going to take, where are we? Aftertouch, and we're going to send that to the cutoff of the filter frequency. Now, once I've done this, I need to add an amount to it. So I'm going to add a little bit of an amount here. Now, hopefully I've got my Aftertouch turned on the Launchpad Pro. Bear with me a second. Okay, let's go for that. And Aftertouch. Yeah, I think it's turned on. So basically now when I hit a note, so I'm just playing down a chord here, and as I press down, now I'm going to move over here to try and demonstrate this. And I'm just going to add a bit more of an amount to it and just bring the filter down so we get more of a pronounced effect. Now that's channel Aftertouch. You can see as I press hard on the upper key, that's opening the filter for both of those sounds. So let me just turn on Poly Aftertouch, and I've got to try and remember this one. I think it's this one. Let's try. There we go. Now I've got individual control over the filter for each note. So there's the low note, here's the high note. Let's just bring out the low note. Bring that back, bring out the high note. And any note in between. So Poly Aftertouch is a really interesting thing that can basically allow you to control whatever you want. So we've got Oscillator 2 on here. Instead of doing the filter, let's change Oscillator 2's pitch. Why not? Let's just bring that value down a bit because we don't want it to go too crazy. But now, oh yeah, let's open up the filter so we can hear it. And let's just turn a bit more. We can make your synthesizer sound drunk, or we can turn it into a nice ghostly sound. Add a bit of reverb for that. And that's just using the pressure from the Launchpad Pro to my side to play the pitch. Well, I wasn't expecting to do this on a Saturday afternoon, but anyway, there we go. Okay, let's have another quick look at the comments just to see if we've got any more kind of sound stuff. Let's see. Okay, hey CALC, can you show us maybe the ARP function by designing an ARP section with a really short block? Maybe you could use recursive modulation to achieve this. Well, I mean, of course we can use the arpeggiator, but I do have a little idea here for something else that we could try. So let's just put on the arpeggiator for now, and we'll go to played. Now, one thing I really like about this played mode is it will follow the order of the notes that you play, but you can kind of repeat notes as well. So let's just, I'm going to press a C. Let's get a nice kind of plucky sound. It did want a plucky sound. Okay, let's take it down to a single octave. Now I'll add another note. Oh yeah, let's add latch on. So now, I don't know if you can tell, but we're repeating that low note, that C, down at the bottom. Now let's add a B flat. And let's add a C, and then a B, and then a C, and then a B flat, and then a C and a B flat. So it's almost like a little sequence that you can kind of program in using the played mode in the arpeggiator, which I think is really quite nice. Now, that's playing. Let's keep that on. Now I'm going to open up the envelopes. Okay, so let's now play around with the looping envelopes. And this is something that I really enjoy working with. We've got a loop switch here. Now if I switch the loop on, basically it means that this envelope shape is just going to cycle round between the decay and the attack point. So if I bring down the decay point, we can now start to use the envelope as kind of like a shape control. And let's just bring the tempo right down. Oh, hang on. Yeah, we're just clocking externally here. Let's just bring that. Okay. Another thing I could have done actually is I could just kept that on the external and just bring the rhythm down. And actually, no, let's just do that internally. Now, so there you see we've now got this kind of repeating shape here. And you could go really crazy with that. I'd basically go into kind of amplitude modulation areas. So that's quite interesting. Let's do the same thing on the envelope for the filter. Now, maybe we'll just take off the arpeggiator and I'll just play a chord for this. It might be a bit better. Now you can hear we've got the two looping envelopes. We've got one which is controlling the filter, which is completely out of time, if you like, in a different time scale to the one that we've got firing off the amplifier envelope. So this gives us an opportunity to kind of get some really quite nice kind of rhythmic stuff going on. Between these two filters. Let's add a bit of reverb on that as well. Always reach for the reverb on the Summit. Bit of chorus as well. Why not? I'm going to go all out now. Let's bring in the Oscillator 3. So this is just using the repeating envelopes. And you can kind of bring them back in a bit there. You can have some really a lot of fun with that sort of thing. Now, yeah, I'm going to just try and share a tip. Now this, I have to say, this was one that was brought to my attention by one of my colleagues, Ricky Tinez on YouTube. And he did a video where he was basically just exploring how you could use the phasing of the LFOs to get some quite interesting stuff going on. And whilst I'd obviously kind of known about resetting the LFOs and putting them in and out of phase before, he had a really clever method where we can just kind of, well, let's just start this from scratch. So I'm going to just start with an LFO1 on the filter. Let's go for, yeah, I'll go for a sawtooth, and we'll bring the speed up reasonably well. Okay, that's good enough. Now basically when I hit the next note and the next note, you see they're all kind of triggering in a common way. And that's just kind of the nature of the way that the synth engine, when you initialize a patch, is kind of configured. Now, if we go to the LFO menu, and we're going to go to the phase page, you see it's on free phase. Oh, actually, yeah. They're kind of almost sort of there, but they're not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it to being at 0 degrees. So that means that now when I press, they're all going to come back in at the different times. So now what I can do here is just latch this on. So you can just hold a chord there, and now you can use the LFO almost as a bit of a kind of a weird looper delay kind of effect. And let's now go to slew the LFO. So let's just round off the edges a little bit. There we go. Let's bring in a second oscillator. Alright, now it's just clipping a touch. So this is important. This is the VCA gain here. And that just lets you just back off the volume. So if you find that you're going to get a bit clippy like this, of course there are many gain stages here in the Summit. So, okay. Got a request to add some delay. I think that's a very good shout. So let's just bring some delay in. Actually, let's take the slew off a little bit more now so we get our picks. And of course, the reverb. Actually, no, what we'll do is we'll go to the effects modulation. Now this is cool. I mean, we've got our modulation matrix here, but we've also got the same thing for the effects. So we've got some kind of global LFOs down here. So we've got LFOs per voice here, LFO 1 and 2, and then globals LFO 3 and 4. Now these are here, and these allow us to address the global effects, the effects that we have on the instrument. Sorry, I keep forgetting to look up and see which screen I'm on. So I've gone to the effects modulation matrix here, and we're going to access these LFOs here and start to do some control on the on the reverb level. So let's bring in LFO 3. We'll go for plus only, so only a positive. We'll bring that into the reverb level, and let's bring the depth up full. Bring the rate right down. In fact, let's go to a square wave for it. Let's bring that rate up a bit. Let's see how we're getting on. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a negative amount and turn the reverb on full. You can hear it clipping a little bit there. Let's go to... let's get a bigger sound. Actually, let's just put the reverb at the end as well. At the minute, we're routing all the effects through parallel here. So let's go to the routing and put the reverb at the end. So now you can go off and make a cup of tea. Have this just going on in the background. And yeah, just enjoy this. Let's just bring the frequency right down there. We've got oscillator 2. Let's add a bit of FM to it. Why not? We'll add some FM to oscillator 1. There we go. Maybe apply a little bit of LFO to the pitch of oscillator 3. Which is now going to start, obviously, with the frequency modulation, start playing around with oscillator 1. As you could probably guess, you could just go down this rabbit hole for hours and hours. This session's supposed to be an hour. I'm having a lot of fun though, so I might just carry on for a little bit longer. There's a couple of things I wanted to speak about as well. So yeah, I'm tell you what, I'm gonna do a couple more things and then we'll see how it goes. But let's go to yeah. I'm just going to stop this now. Right, there we go. All gone. Hit the initialize button. All that hard work disappeared. Of course, if I wasn't stupid, I could have just gone and hit the save button and just saved that and brought it back whenever I want. Okay, right. Just there's a question here, which looks like a technical question. Does the Summit still not store the local offsetting when you power it off? No, it doesn't. Basically, you have to turn the local off when you power it on. That's from D Carmichael 00. So no, it's not changed. That's the way it is. So yeah, okay. Well, anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my Launchpad Pro over on the other side. So over here, I've got the Launchpad Pro. I've got this sending MIDI to the Summit, sending it to the whole room actually in here. And I believe if I hit play. There we go. I've got a bit of a beat going on. This is coming through from my Octatrack, which is just here in front of me. Now, at the minute, I'm obviously the Octatrack is actually, well, the Octatrack is passing through this auto boom. So if I turn that down, we'll not hear it. But I've got on the back of the Octatrack here a second pair of outputs, which are called Q outs. And I'm going to use my Launchpad Pro over here just to open up the Q outs. Now I've got a little mapping that I've created here for my Octatrack on the Launchpad Pro. It just gives me really great control over different aspects of this. And if we switch back now, you'll see now that my lights are flashing here. That's basically saying, okay, all this audio is being passed out of the Q outputs. Now the Q outputs are plugged into the audio inputs on the back of Peak here. So if I press a key, there we go, our initialized patch as always. Now, if I go to my voice menu and just scroll on, you'll see here I've got audio input. And the Summit synth has got a stereo input on the back here. And we can pass any audio we want through the Summit synthesizer. So here I'm just going to turn this on and I've got a choice of turning it pre-filter or post-filter. I'm going to go pre-filter. So that means that beat that we had, in fact this beat, is going to come into the Summit and then pass through the filter, and then if I want to, onto the effects. Now, I just want to check my clock here again because I want to go from, yeah, I'm going to clock from the Launchpad for this, but yeah, so let's go pre-filter. Now you'll notice we can't hear anything at the minute. You're thinking, well, why, if we're setting the audio, it's plugged in here, we can't hear it, why not? And that's because with all synthesizers, basically, the amplifier is closed until you hit a key, or unless you latch it on, of course. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but basically oscillators are always making a sound, but obviously we can't hear them until we hit a key. And when I hit a key, it opens the amplifier. It turns the amplifier's volume up. We can hear the sound. So if I press, you see now the sound is coming through. But I'm also getting the oscillator as well. So no matter, I've got an oscillator mixer here. So I'll just turn everything down on there and just bring the VCA down a touch as well. Now I'm going to latch the key, so sustain the key on, so it's like putting a credit card in there and just jamming it so it's always on, but there we go. Now we have the octatrack beat passing through Summit. Now I'm just using a single voice for this, so be aware, because if I open up a few voices, i.e. if I press a chord, we're actually going to double up every time we add another note to the volume that's coming out. So see, there's a huge difference in that sound, because now we have 4 notes, so 4 times the, well, for a sum, if you like, of 4 of those parts. Let's just bring it back down to a single part. That's a bit better for what we want to do. So now I have an analog filter coming after my beat. Bring up the resonance. So I can use the filter here, and of course I can LFO that, add a bit of distortion or overdrive into it. Now this can obviously be a little bit messy depending on what you're feeding it. I've got quite a hectic beat with a lot of low end rumbling through. So maybe we'll take the overdrive off there. But of course, we've got looping envelopes as well. So let's apply some envelope, and we'll need to re-trigger it. So once I've turned the looping on, it's not going to start looping the envelope that is held down. I'm going to have to re-trigger the envelope. So let's just press another note. And again, now we can hear that envelope. Basically now running the filter. Now I can also add my beloved delay and reverb stuff on here. So let's go to sync to keep it in time, and I'm going to bring it down to 8th notes. Actually, I'm going to very quickly change the routing here. Once again, we're in parallel mode there, but I'm going to go into, let's see, we'll go reverb, delay, chorus, yeah, and we'll add up the delay now. We'll put stick a bit of chorus on the end as well. So this is the original beat now mixed in with what we've just done with the audio processing here in the Summit. Now another interesting thing that we can do here is we've got an arpeggiator. Now the arpeggiator, of course, is going to be clocking from the Launchpad, which is also clocking the octatrack. So everything's going to be in time. So let me just turn this up so I can press the notes in time. So there's the beat, the normal beat. And let me just hold down a chord. Now you can see the voices triggering here. And of course now the amplifier is being triggered by the arpeggiator, the notes being held down. So this is a great way of getting a little bit of rhythm, if you like, into the kind of the effect as well. And I've got the gate control here. The gate control controls the length of the time of the arpeggiator notes. So you can get this kind of nice, well, here we've got this kind of nice dubby sort of sound going on with the attack of the amplifier, just kind of giving it a bit of a sort of almost a sidechain feel. Let's bring in the original again. Okay, great. Okay, now Vimana's have said, and this is a great idea actually, we can get some great effect sounds by modulating the delay time, the delay speed, the delay effect. So why don't we do that? So if we go to the effects mod, so the modulation matrix for the effects, and let's go to let's get LFO, let's go LFO 3, and we'll add that to delay time, and we'll add a bit of depth. Let's add up the feedback a little bit as well. Let's just bring the original sound down. And actually take it out of sync. So you can get some pretty crazy stuff going on there. And further to that as well, we can change the slew rate of the delay to basically have a different kind of effect, the way that it speeds up. Let's go to delay. Let's bring the rate down of LFO3. So now we've got the delay time being modulated by the LFO here. Again, let's bring in the original beat to go behind it. So, let's just hit stop there. Once again, you go down the rabbit hole. Yeah, so basically that's using, Summit as an audio processor. Now, one important thing that I should mention here that I haven't sort of said is that we're at the minute just treating Summit as a single instrument. And of course, Summit is a very powerful multi-timbre instrument as well. What does multi-timbre mean? Well, actually, I say multi-timbre, this is what we call bitimbre. This can give you two sounds. Multi-timbre means many sounds, basically, many different sounds. The Summit is essentially one big 16-note polyphonic synthesizer. Or if I go into the multi-menu, now it becomes two 8-voice synths, and I have controls for those here. So here is part A, here is part B. And part A has got one sound, part B has got another sound, and we can kind of do things with this. We can either layer the sounds on top of each other, we can use a split point on the keyboard so that we can play two sounds at the same time with two different hands, or we can treat it as two completely individual instruments. We can use dual. Now, this patch, let's just go back to the original one. Yeah, this is actually one that we used, or I used, when I was doing a presentation at Super Booth when we very first announced Summit. And it's got some interesting things going on. I'll just kind of finish off with a little bit of a kind of a noodle around on this patch, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. So the initial thing is, if I just press and hold a key, now I'm just going to change the tempo, and that's clocking from the Launchpad, so bear with me. There we go, just brought the tempo down a little bit there. Of course, the Arpeggiator's locked onto the external tempo coming in. And with this track, basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just press a load of notes. Oh, hang on, let's do the right notes. Basically a C minor scale. Okay, now you can't hear those notes, and that's because Oscillator 2 and Oscillator 3 here, if we just look at the oscillator page, they're on a fixed note, which means that no matter what notes I'm playing, they're always going to play the same single note. And if I go to Oscillator 3, there's a fixed note of a C, Oscillator 2, fixed note of a G. So I've got this kind of drone, this kind of chord of a fifth being played. That's Oscillator 2 and 3, but Oscillator 1 is not on a fixed note. Now obviously I pressed and held a note, and then I've added some extra notes to it. Now if I go to the played menu here, and then I just bring up Oscillator 1's volume, that's just running up. Let's go. Oh, of course I played them going up, didn't I? But never mind. So I can just kind of hold it down. And if I wanted to go even more, I could just go random. That's probably going to do the trick. So I've just kind of got this nice drone and this almost kind of sequency thing going on in the background. Of course, I've got my FM controls here. So FMing a square wave with a sawtooth. It's going to get some interesting kind of almost sort of ring moddy kind of sounds coming out of that. Let's go up an octave. Now, the other thing that I've got here is in the mod matrix, you see I've got animate switch to Oscillator 2's pitch. And animate 2 switch to Oscillator 3's pitch. So when I press the animate switch here, basically I'm giving an extra switch to make a change to the sound. So I'm just going to press this number 1. So I can use this to change the chord underneath. And then what I was doing in my Super Booth presentation was using the oscillator tuning here. And then I can just turn off the animate switching here. Okay, so that's a single sound. That's quite interesting already. Now let's going to move to part B now. Now part B is a completely different sound. If we go to our multi here, part B, actually yeah, this was one of the Lego Velt patches I think, called Druid Music. Part A, Tambora Arrays. Again, that was another Lego Velt preset. But this one, again, they've been changed a little bit, but now if I press, I'll just latch that on. See, we've got a totally different sound for the second part. So again, we'll add some FM to this. Play the right notes, of course. So you can see there we've got two totally different sounds on. Oh, wow, there he goes. Instantly hits the instant initialize. No matter, I can just go patch, bring it back. That's no worries. Basically, yeah, you've got two different sounds that you can use to layer up on top of each other. What else do we have here as well? I don't know. Oh yeah, they're not gonna work, I don't think. Now this one, I think this is off. This is from Benny, one of my favorite YouTube YouTube ambient music makers. So let's just listen to those two sounds individually. That's sound here, and then go to part B. Kind of lovely old tape sound. So that's in dual mode where we can play them separately, but if we go to layer, what happens is one keyboard will stack the sounds on top of each other, and you basically can treat two patches, join them together and just use them as a single patch, and again you just get some incredible results from that. Now another interesting thing we can do is we can actually control both of those two separate patches together. If I press A and B together, you'll see now that goes white. And now the filter control will control both of the parts. So obviously everything's filtered down there. We open it back up again. Anyway, right, I think I'm going to finish up now. I've been talking for far too long and just basically enjoying myself a bit too much, I think. So that was a bit of an interesting kind of, as I say, the plan for today's session was really just kind of, let's have a bit of fun, let's make some sounds on the instrument, let's explore a little bit about the instrument, and check out some of the things that you can do with it. The Summit it really genuinely is a bit of a powerhouse of an instrument. I mean, I know I'm quite biased being somebody who works at Novation, but I have to say, I think this has become a bit of a desert island instrument for me, because it just genuinely, it does so many things, and it does them all incredibly well, incredibly powerfully as well. So that's a look at the Summit synthesizer. I hope it's been interesting to you, and I think we'll leave it there for now. Oh, by the way, as part of the Synthfest 2020 continued kind of stuff that's going on today, the Sound on Sound Synthfest 2020, I'm going to be joining Jamie Morden, Geosynths, a bit later on, about 6 o'clock this evening, just for a chat, really, just for a bit of a catch up and just to chat about things. In that, I guess I'll be talking about sort of stuff that we're doing at Novation, but also, I'll be kind of talking a bit about the other stuff and the other gear that's in the room as well. So if you're interested, do come along. But otherwise, thanks very much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and enjoy Synthfest 2020. Thanks a lot. Oh dear. Be careful with your patch changing. I'm going to leave it there.